Very good. But God made an amazing promise there, and Joel spoke it. Joel spoke of a time when God's Spirit would be poured out on all people. We know that happened on the day of Pentecost, but the prophet Joel prophesied that the Spirit of God would be poured out on young and old, and on men and women. He predicted that the young would see visions from God, and that the old would receive messages from God in a dream. The word that there is translated dream really has a fairly specific meaning about the way that God sends a dream, the way that, like Joseph saw an angel in a dream telling him to take Mary and Jesus and get down to Egypt because Herod was trying to kill baby Jesus. It's that kind of a dream. Now, a lot of times when you hear somebody talking about a vision, as I told the kids, they're usually talking about somebody's idea or mental picture of the future. When our little granddaughter Macy here puts on these visioning glasses, you can see she sees Jesus. And okay, that's a Vacation Bible School decoration. Glasses that reflect Jesus. So okay, Jean's working on those. And if you're good, maybe she'll show you pictures of the tornado that she made as a part of this year's Vacation Bible School. I think it's really pretty cool. Well, some visions are merely human, right? Some visions are from God, but having a vision is absolutely crucial for progress, and every person needs a vision of some kind, whether it's building a successful business like this young lady. She's got ideas of how that business is going to grow, and she's got ideas, vision, research, planning, strategy, and all those kinds of things that lead to success. Or whether it's something like a vision of, when I retire, I want to live in a place like this with a creek that doesn't flood, or something like that. But that might be a kind of a vision that would be somebody's dream. But without a vision to guide and motivate us, we fall into apathy. Nothing happens. There's no energy to move in a specific direction or to move in growth. So the question is, what is this church's vision? I've preached a little bit about this discipleship vision or discipleship system before. But what is this church's vision? What do we hope for the future? Now, I've got a kind of a demonstration of a vision here from the comic strip Zits. Any of you read the comic strip Zits? Yeah, Jeremy, you got this teenager in here. Jeremy's mom has a vision of how household chores should be done, right? You should vacuum in straight lines, not just willy-nilly. You should not just throw stuff out on the plate. You should set the table nicely with placemats and everything in its place. You don't just pile dishes in the dishwasher, but you stack everything in neatly so the dishes get clean. You can see Jeremy's reaction here. Look at that. Look at this expression on his face. You can sort of tell what he's thinking. He is astounded by his mother's vision, because her vision is not only how to do these things, she has a vision of him growing up into a responsible adult that does all these things in the correct way. But he's got a little different vision that you see in this next frame. Yeah, fund me, feed me, fund me, leave me alone. Which is kind of the typical teenage vision for what they want in life. A lot of times, maybe not always, Grace, right? Yeah. Or, well, she didn't shake her head no, so I don't know. We'll see. Members within a church can have competing visions, and it can lead to problems when some have a vision of the sanctuary with blue carpet, and some have a vision of the sanctuary with a red carpet, and there's conflict over that. You can also have problems or a conflict that arises when a pastor and the congregation have visions that differ from one another. Let's say you've got a pastor who's got a vision of the church being composed of ministry teams where you've got folks who will be in charge of the building operations, who will be in charge of serving, who will be part of a prayer ministry, who will join hands together to get things done. And then maybe some members have a very different vision, like this guy. What do you mean that's the preacher's job? Right? Okay, that can create all kinds of tension. Well, we all have our own idea of what the future should hold for the church, but the church cannot just be about your vision or my vision. Who does the church belong to? To God, yeah. Katie's got these pointing up. Yes, that's been the affirmation of the church from the beginning, that the church is of God. And so when we say Jesus is the Lord, we're saying that He is the boss, He is the owner, He is in charge of the church overall. And when He was ready to ascend, He told His disciples, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. He said, God the Father put me in charge. Because of that, go and make disciples. Because I am the one in charge. That is a vision. It's not a human vision, not merely a human vision. It involves human beings, but it is God's vision. God's vision is that we make disciples for Jesus Christ. It's not just about increasing numbers, but if we are busy making disciples, the numbers are going to grow. It's not just about getting more people in worship attendance, even though if we're making more and mature disciples, there will be more people in worship. It's about inspiring people to follow Jesus Christ, to try to live like Him, to follow His way. Well, if God's vision is for Christians to make disciples, how do we do that? How do we do that? Wow, that's really the $64,000 question, even though when that program was popular, when I was a kid, $64,000 was a lot of money. Anymore, $64,000 might buy you a nice lot without anything built on it some places. Some places it wouldn't even do that. But the big question is, how do we make disciples? And there are people who have done the research, who have spent lots of time and come up with things in line with the Bible, and they've come up with at least 5 ways that the church needs to be disciples in order to make disciples for Jesus Christ. Now, I'm going to list 5 things here. And I'm not saying that the vision for our church needs to be to do all all 5 of these things and all at the same time. We can't do that. We'd have to narrow our thinking down to work on one at a time. But the first vision, the first way that that we need to operate in order to make disciples is in the area of hospitality. Now, last week, obviously, Gene and I weren't here, and we were in worship. We went to a pretty large church, and I said to Gene as we were getting out of the vehicle, let's time it now and see how long it takes somebody to greet us and tell us hello. It took a woman 5 minutes before Gene got greeted in the ladies' room, and it took 10 minutes for somebody to greet me. She must be a lot more approachable than I am, or something like that. I probably look mean, and so it took me longer. But that's a part of hospitality. We could actually include the little girl that opened the door for us as we came into the church, about this tall, wearing a pretty red dress. She and her family were coming in, and she went and opened the door for us, and well, it was just adorable. That's the kind of thing that is a great job of hospitality. And we were talking about it, and I said, Ezra would do that. And there are times, that he's been there greeting us at the door, opening the door for us and stuff down here when we've come. But how eager are we to not only have people come and worship with us, but how willing are we to make a convenient place for them to fit into the congregation? How welcoming and accepting are we? And it's more than just personal relationships, which are important. It's also about how warm and friendly the surroundings seem, which is why I asked people to do some cleaning in the church last Sunday, and thank you for everybody that worked to trim the bushes and clean the church and stuff, because when you come into a place, let's say you come into a church you're visiting, and the floors are dirty, and there's cobwebs, and things are out of place, what does that tell you? Does that look hospitable? I wouldn't imagine so. But hospitality is such an important part of us being disciples and making disciples that I really think that hospitality should be an important part of the vision for the future that we have as a congregation. So hospitality, very important. Vital worship. And this is something that I need to do better at. I need to work harder at it. I need to figure out a way to help involve more people in worship, and to make worship something that doesn't quite put people to sleep as much. Not that I just need to holler out every once in a while over the microphone to keep people awake, but I have continued to pray. I got one more year before I retire, and I want my last year to be one where hopefully I can do better at coming up with more vital worship in the church, where we can experience God's presence in, maybe some new ways, maybe some more powerful ways. But vital worship is an important part of making disciples. And, a part of that is people showing up for worship, being consistent in worship. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but when the church has a bunch of folks here, it lifts all of our spirits. But when it's mainly empty pews, and I feel like I'm kind of shouting at the walls, it's tough. Worship just doesn't have the same energy without you here, right? And so being in worship is an important part of that vitality. Disciples taking responsibility for their own spiritual growth. That's a part of maturity, and using spiritual disciplines and teaching those spiritual disciplines to others is so important, and it's got to be more than just an hour on Sunday morning. This has got to be the use of spiritual disciplines and growing spiritually daily or weekly, more than just coming to worship together once a week. Generosity and service. Generosity is so important, not only in the life of the church, but also being generous to those around us, those outside the church. Being generous materially, financially, and also serving those outside of the church. It's that old thing about if your church closed and was not there tomorrow, who would notice? Who would care? Well, if we're serving others in the community, people would notice. But what do you think? If the church closed tomorrow, would anybody in the community notice? How would they miss this congregation? The last point is that disciple makers and disciples of Jesus are working on continually becoming more Christ-like. When we were pretty new Christians, there was, we started going to church, but there was a man who came to work on the church staff. His name was Steele Harmon. Some of you might remember that I've talked about him a couple of different times in church, but this guy had a contagious and infectious faith. When he would walk around the church, he was one of those people who developed a train of children. He was like a Pied Piper, and he'd have kids hanging off of him. He was a former coach, and he'd be grabbing kids and throwing kids around, the kind of stuff that some of the what would you call it, safe sanctuaries people, the people that say, oh, you can't touch kids, you can't hug kids, you can't do this or that, they would have probably cringed watching Steele, because he was just, he was really good with kids. He taught our two boys how to wrestle, taught them neat wrestling moves like the nose jammer. Sounds really good, right? And the fish hook, which he said you got to do the nose jammer, get the finger up the nose first, and then you get that in their mouth, that same finger, and it's a great. Did your coach teach you that in wrestling? He did. That's because it's really dirty wrestling. So okay, I'm glad your coach didn't teach you that. At any rate, Steele just clowned around with kids, and they flocked to him. And he was one of the most tender-hearted, compassionate, loving people that I've ever met. And his faith was infectious. He started teaching a Sunday school class, and it ballooned to about 30 or 40 people just because of the power of his personality and his love for Christ that attracted people like crazy. So, all of us, if we are in the process of becoming more Christ-like, that'll be more attractive to people. That will be an important part of our vision for being Christ's church in the future. Well, is there any place in any of those things that you can see that's an important vision for our church? Something that gives us energy, that moves us forward, that helps us grow as Christians. The life of the church depends on people who will commit themselves to maturing in their own lives and working to make disciples of Jesus. And it's not something that we can do in our own strength. Being disciples and making disciples takes leaning on the power of the Holy Spirit as we seek to mature in these 5 ways. One of the ways that we do this is to be open to God's Holy Spirit through the sacrament of Holy Communion.